You feel it every time your words fall flat. Every time you open your mouth and watch your message dissolve in the noise of louder voices, faster talkers, or people who seem to command attention without effort. You wonder why some individuals speak once and get remembered, while you repeat yourself 3 times just to be noticed. This is the hidden truth most people never confront. Communication is the currency of opportunity, and most people are walking around broke, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because they never learned the psychology behind being heard. You know the pain of being misunderstood. You know the frustration of offering ideas that float into the void, unacknowledged, unvalued. You know what it feels like to watch someone else say something half as insightful, yet receive twice the recognition. It stings. It creates doubt. It makes you question whether your voice actually matters. And that silent doubt becomes the cage that keeps you from stepping forward. But here's the pivot point you've ignored. The issue has never been your ideas. The issue has never been your vocabulary. The issue is the psychological impact your presence projects before your words even arrive. Influence doesn't start in the mouth. It starts in the mind, your mind, and the minds of the people listening. Every room you enter is governed by invisible rules, and the people who understand them speak with power long before they speak with words. Think back to the moments when conversations slipped out of your control, when someone cut you off, when you apologized before making a point, when your voice trembled even though your thoughts were solid. Those moments weren't failures. They were symptoms. Symptoms of a deeper gap between who you are internally and how you communicate externally. Most people never bridge that gap. They live their whole lives silenced by their own hesitation. But you won't. Not anymore. Because once you understand the psychology of communication, everything changes. You begin to see that clarity is not about speaking more. It's about speaking with intention. Authority is not about volume. It's about certainty. Presence is not about perfection. It's about alignment between your thoughts, your voice, and your identity. When you speak from that alignment, you don't compete for attention. You command it. Imagine walking into a room and knowing exactly how to position your energy so people turn toward you instead of away. Imagine expressing yourself without the fear of being dismissed. Imagine conversations where your ideas land with weight, where your tone carries confidence, where your presence sets the frame before the dialogue even begins. This isn't fantasy. This is technique. This is strategy. This is the new version of you learning how to speak smart. And here's the breakthrough. Communication is not a talent. It's a trained psychology. You're not born with influence. You build it. You shape it. You practice it until your voice carries the same power your mind has always held. The gap closes. The cage unlocks. The overlooked version of you begins to fade. You are stepping into a different arena now, one where words are tools, not fillers, one where silence has purpose, one where the way you breathe, pause, and structure your message determines whether people rise to meet your ideas or turn away from them. This is the hidden power behind every word you will speak from this moment forward. You are no longer here to be heard randomly. You are here to be heard intentionally, to influence ethically, to communicate with precision, to shape conversations instead of surviving them. You are about to learn the psychology that leaders, negotiators, storytellers, and high-impact communicators rely on every day. And as you move through this journey, you will feel the shift. The hesitation that once held you back will turn into clarity. The doubt that once made you small will transform into grounded confidence. The confusion that once scattered your message will dissolve into focused delivery. You will become the kind of person who speaks once and speaks with purpose. This is your turning point. This is the beginning of your mastery. Now, we move forward into the mechanics, the psychology, and the strategies that will redefine how you communicate for the rest of your life. You are stepping onto a path that demands intention, awareness, and courage. You will confront the habits that dilute your presence and replace them with behaviors that elevate your influence. You will learn to enter conversations with certainty instead of hesitation, with clarity instead of confusion. Every chapter ahead deepens your power, sharpens your voice, and expands your ability to shape the world around you. This is more than learning to speak. It is learning to command your life. And the journey begins now. Step forward now. Chapter 1: The Psychology of Being Heard. You've felt it your whole life. Some people speak, and the room shifts toward them. Others speak, and nothing happens. The difference isn't luck or charm or some mysterious gift. It's psychology. It's the mind's instinctive ability to judge, sort, and prioritize voices long before words are fully processed. Every time you open your mouth, people are already deciding whether your message matters. They don't wait. They don't analyze. Their brains make the call within seconds. And that's why communication can feel so unfair. You've had moments when you spoke from the heart, moments when you delivered real insight, and yet the reaction fell flat. Eyes drifted, energy dropped. The conversation moved on as if you were never part of it. Meanwhile, someone else offered something shallow, something obvious, something you could have said better, and somehow they owned the moment. It leaves you confused. It leaves you doubting yourself. It leaves you wondering why your voice doesn't land the way you intend it to. The truth is simple but rarely taught. The brain listens to presence before it listens to meaning. It listens to confidence before content, tone before logic, energy before sentences. Influence begins long before language. When you speak with scattered energy, rushed pacing, or hesitant tone, the brain interprets it as noise, something to bypass, something to tune out. Not because your ideas are weak, but because your delivery signals uncertainty. And uncertainty, to the human mind, feels like a cue to disengage. But when you speak with calm weight, when your voice carries intention, when your pacing is measured, when your presence feels anchored, people lean in automatically. They can't help it. Their minds register safety, authority, and clarity. These are the cues the brain is wired to follow. Not the fanciest words, not the longest explanations, just the simple, embodied confidence that says, "You should listen to this." This is the unlock most people never experience. They spend their lives trying to sound smarter, trying to memorize better words, trying to imitate charisma. But influence doesn't come from imitation. It comes from alignment, from the internal decision that you deserve to be heard, followed by external behavior that matches that belief. Your tone is the first signal. A steady, grounded tone communicates self-trust. It communicates that you are not searching for your place in the room. You have already claimed it. People subconsciously trust voices that sound emotionally regulated. They trust voices that don't wobble, don't rush, don't collapse under pressure. This doesn't require deep acting or a rehearsed performance. It requires awareness. You learn to breathe. You learn to slow down. You learn to let silence do some of the talking for you. Pacing is the second layer. When you rush, you communicate fear. When you pause, you communicate ownership. You send a message. I am not trying to escape this moment. I am leading it. The brain responds to that. It sees your calm as competence. It sees your control as confidence. And once the mind believes you are confident, it begins treating your ideas as valuable. Presence is the final piece, the invisible ingredient behind every powerful communicator. Presence is your ability to be fully here, your attention rooted in the moment, not diluted by overthinking or self-judgment. People can feel when you're present. They feel it in your eyes, in your pauses, in the way your energy doesn't jitter or scatter. Presence creates gravity. Gravity makes people listen. None of these skills are natural for most people. They are trained. They are sharpened. They are built through repetition. And the moment you accept that influence is a skill, not a personality trait, you begin to transform. You stop seeing yourself as someone who just isn't naturally charismatic. You start seeing communication for what it really is, a strategic, psychological game that you can learn to play with mastery. But with all this potential comes a warning. Getting communication wrong has consequences. If your tone signals uncertainty, people will doubt you, even if your ideas are strong. If your pacing feels frantic, people will retreat, even if your intentions are good. If your presence feels scattered, people will disengage, even if your message matters deeply. These small cues accumulate. They shape reputations. They define careers. They determine who gets respected, who gets ignored, and who gets remembered. And that is why becoming heard is more than a skill. It is a responsibility to your future, to your relationships, to your ambitions. When you speak with clarity, you reshape your identity. You become someone others trust, someone others follow, someone whose voice carries weight instead of wandering in the background. As you move forward, you will learn to master these psychological levers with precision. You will understand the signals that inspire trust and the behaviors that trigger doubt. You will learn how to take control of conversations instead of slipping through them. You will learn how to speak in a way that stops people, centers them, and makes them feel the depth of what you're saying. And to do that, you must first understand what breaks communication, what ruins presence, dilutes tone, collapses pacing, and destroys influence before it even begins. Most people stumble into these traps daily. They don't see the damage they're causing. They don't understand the psychology behind their habits. They repeat the same patterns again and again, wondering why their voice never seems to land the way they hope. You won't repeat those patterns. You are entering this journey with awareness, with intention, with the willingness to look at the unseen forces behind your communication identity. You are ready to build presence. You are ready to build clarity. You are ready to build influence that lasts. And that next step begins by understanding the mistakes, the subtle, silent, destructive habits that weaken even the strongest minds. The moment you recognize them is the moment your transformation accelerates. When you're ready, we move deeper. Chapter 2: The 7 Fatal Communication Mistakes. You've been in conversations where everything felt right in your mind, yet everything fell apart once the words left your mouth. You had clarity internally, but something in the delivery fractured the message. That fracture isn't random. It comes from 7 predictable mistakes, 7 psychological traps that silently destroy credibility, weaken presence, and strip your words of their impact. Most people make these mistakes every single day without even realizing it. And every day, those mistakes make them smaller, softer, easier to overlook. But not you. Not anymore. The first mistake is over-explaining. You've done it. Everyone has. You start with a simple point, but then you keep adding layers, running circles around it, filling the space with proof, because you're afraid the original point wasn't strong enough. Over-explaining signals insecurity. It tells the mind of the listener that you don't trust your message. So why should they? It's like watching someone try to convince themselves while talking to others. People tune out because the clarity dissolves. A strong point becomes a fog. An influence cannot exist inside fog. The second mistake is apologetic energy. Not literal apologies, though many people say sorry like punctuation, but the deeper posture of shrinking. The energy that says, I hope this is okay, or I don't want to bother you, or I'm not sure what I'm saying matters. You see it in slouched posture, in lowered tone, in the way someone's voice bends at the end of every sentence. When you speak with apologetic energy, you give your authority away before you've even begun. People don't lean into voices that apologize for existing. They lean into voices that stand tall, voices that carry the quiet conviction, I belong here. The third mistake is drowning in filler words. Like, filler words aren't harmless. They interrupt rhythm, they break flow, they signal mental clutter, and cluttered communication makes the listener work harder than they should. When someone must work to understand you, they stop wanting to. A few filler words won't destroy you, but a pattern of them drains your presence. They make your message feel tentative, scattered, unanchored. You can't project power if your sentences collapse under hesitation. The fourth mistake is emotional volatility. This is when your feelings hijack the message. Maybe frustration leaks into your tone. Maybe urgency becomes anxiety. Maybe passion becomes aggression. Once the listener senses emotional chaos, they protect themselves by disconnecting. Volatility makes your message unpredictable, and the brain avoids unpredictability. When your emotions erupt through your communication, you lose control, not just of the moment, but of how others perceive your entire character. Emotional regulation is not suppression, it is command. Influence requires that command. The fifth mistake is poor framing. This is one of the most devastating errors because it happens before the conversation even begins. Framing is the lens through which your message is interpreted. If you frame a point weakly, this might be a dumb idea, or I'm not sure, but maybe, you sabotage your message before it even breathes. If you frame a conversation reactively, others control the narrative. Powerful communication requires intentional framing, choosing the angle, setting the tone, defining the expectation. Without it, Your message enters the world vulnerable and unprotected. The sixth mistake is unclear intention. People cannot respect what they cannot understand. When you enter a conversation without knowing what you want, your communication becomes blurry. Blurry intentions lead to blurry outcomes. If you don't know whether you're trying to solve, persuade, connect, or clarify, your message wanders. And when your message wanders, people stop listening. Intention is the anchor that keeps your words from drifting away. Once intention becomes clear, your presence sharpens instantly. The seventh mistake is reactive listening. This happens when you listen only to reply, defend, or counter. You're not absorbing. You're not understanding. You're just waiting for your turn. Reactive listening disconnects you from the emotional landscape of the conversation. It blinds you to tone, nuance, motivation. You respond to shadows instead of substance. And when someone feels unheard, they stop hearing you. Influence dies the moment listening becomes a battlefield instead of a bridge. These 7 mistakes steal power in different ways, but they all share one root danger. They erode trust. Trust in your clarity. Trust in your conviction. Trust in your presence. When any of these traps show up repeatedly, people begin to question your leadership, your reliability, your competence, even if your ideas are brilliant. You've seen this happen. Someone with potential being underestimated, overlooked, sidelined, not because they lacked skill, but because their communication leaked doubt at every turn. Think back to moments when conversations collapsed. Maybe someone cut you off mid-sentence. Maybe your point was dismissed. Maybe confusion rose even though you felt clear. Behind those moments, at least one of these mistakes was active, pulling you backward while you were trying to move forward. But here's the turning point. Once you can see these traps, you can avoid them. Once you know the pattern, you can break it. These mistakes are not proof of weakness. They are proof of untapped potential. Every powerful communicator you admire had to unlearn these habits. Every leader you respect had to rebuild their voice from the inside out. You are stepping into that same evolution. You are not here to feel ashamed of past missteps. You are here to rise above them. You are here to replace over-explaining with concise truth, to replace apologetic energy with grounded presence, to replace filler words with intentional silence, to replace volatility with calm command, to replace poor framing with strategic clarity, to replace unclear intention with purposeful direction, to replace reactive listening with tuned-in awareness. This is where your voice begins to change. This is where your presence starts to strengthen. This is where your communication shifts from accidental to intentional. You are learning how to eliminate the patterns that dilute your message, and once those patterns dissolve, your natural confidence begins to surface. Because the next part of your evolution doesn't start with louder speech. It starts with deeper belief. It starts with rebuilding confidence from the inside out, so your words carry weight because your identity carries weight. And that transformation begins now. Chapter 3. Confidence as a Psychological Weapon. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize their voice has been operating at half power. Not because their ideas were weak, but because their confidence was. You know that moment. The trembling breath before you speak, the slight shake in your tone, the quiet hope that no one interrupts you. This is the version of you shaped by doubt, a version that believes confidence is something you either have or don't. But confidence is not a gift. It is not inherited. It is engineered. And once you learn how to build it, your voice stops collapsing and starts cutting through the noise like a blade. Confidence begins with certainty, not arrogance. Certainty, the inner clarity that says, I know what I'm saying, and I stand behind it. When your mind is scattered, your voice reflects it. When your intention is unclear, your tone exposes it. People don't just hear your words, they hear the tension behind them. They hear the conflict inside you. And when they sense that conflict, they respond with hesitation, doubt, or dismissal. Certainty removes that conflict. Certainty steadies your breath, sharpens your message, and tells the listener, this person is anchored. The second origin of confidence is competence. Competence is the quiet strength you build over time, by preparing, practicing, refining your craft. When you know your material, your mind stops fighting for control. You're not scrambling for words or hoping luck carries you through. You're speaking from a well you've filled yourself. Competence gives you structure. It gives you a backbone. It gives your voice weight because it gives your identity substance. People trust competence. They lean into it. They follow it without needing to be convinced. But the deepest root of confidence is self-trust. This is the part most people miss. Self-trust is the belief that even if things go wrong, even if you stumble, even if you forget, even if you're challenged, you will recover. You will adapt. You will hold your ground. When you have self-trust, you no longer fear mistakes, because mistakes don't threaten you. They don't shake your identity. They don't make you collapse into apology or panic. Self-trust is the internal agreement that you are enough, even in imperfection. When these three forces, certainty, competence, and self-trust, merge, your presence transforms. Your voice slows down, your tone deepens, your breath steadies. Your words carry a clarity they never had before. You stop speaking like you're asking for permission. You stop rushing like you're trying not to be a burden. You stop shrinking like your message needs to fit inside someone else's comfort. You begin speaking from the center of yourself instead of the edges. But before you rise into this stronger version of your voice, you must acknowledge what doubt has done to you. Doubt doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your communication. Every time you've softened your opinion to avoid conflict. Every time you've over-explained because you feared sounding stupid. Every time your voice wavered because you wanted approval. Every time you let someone interrupt you because you weren't sure you deserved the floor. Doubt was the puppeteer. It controlled your tone, your pacing, your confidence. It turned your voice into an echo of your insecurity. And that's why this transformation matters. Because once you see how doubt has manipulated your communication, you can pull the strings out of its hands. Confidence isn't built in grand moments. It's built in daily rituals, tiny behaviors that reshape your psychology from the inside out. Start with your breath. Controlled breathing is controlled energy. Before you speak, inhale slowly, exhale slowly. This signals your nervous system to stand down, to shift from fear to focus. When your body is calm, your voice is calm. Next, practice intentional silence. Before you respond to someone, pause for a moment. Not to create drama, but to create ownership. Silence shows you are not reacting. You are choosing, and choice is the foundation of confidence. Another ritual: speak one sentence with complete certainty every day. It can be a belief, a boundary, a truth you've been avoiding. Declare it out loud with no apology, no wavering. This rewires your identity. It tells your mind, this is how we speak now. This is who we are becoming. Also, practice grounding your body. Plant your feet. Relax your shoulders. Lift your chest slightly. Your physiology shapes your psychology. When your body looks confident, your brain begins to act confident, and your voice follows. And finally, practice ending your sentences with a period, not a question mark disguised as one. No upward inflection, no fading away. Finish your thoughts with conviction. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to perform. You just need to stand firmly inside your own voice. As these rituals accumulate, you will notice something subtle but powerful. People start treating you differently. They give you space to finish. They take your ideas seriously. They speak to you with a different tone, one tinted with respect, because confidence creates a gravitational pull. It draws attention, trust, and credibility automatically. And this is where your evolution accelerates. Because confidence doesn't end with personal courage. Confidence becomes authority. Authority is what happens when your internal certainty becomes external influence. It's the moment people don't just hear you, they follow you. They rely on you. They look to you for clarity when situations grow complicated or tense. Confidence is the foundation. Authority is the expansion. As you step forward, remember this: your voice is not small. It was never small. It was only waiting for you to step into the version of yourself that could carry it with strength. You are no longer building a shaky voice that dissolves under pressure. You are building an unbreakable presence, one that leads the room, stabilizes the moment, and commands attention without demanding it. And now that your confidence is rising, it's time to understand how authority works, how people decide who to take seriously, and how you can embody that presence with precision. Chapter 4: Natural Authority, the Art of Being Taken Seriously. There's a moment in every conversation where people decide who leads and who follows. It's subtle. It's fast. It happens long before the content of your words matters. Authority is not granted by titles, achievements, or status. It is assigned psychologically in real time. People feel it. People sense it. People respond to it without even knowing why. And the truth is, authority is not loud. It's not aggressive. It's not a performance. Natural authority is quiet clarity, grounded presence, the kind of energy that doesn't beg for attention, but receives it anyway. Most people misunderstand authority. They think it's dominance. They think it's force. They think it's controlling the room by taking up as much space as possible. But dominance creates resistance. Authority creates alignment. Dominance pushes. Authority pulls. Dominance raises volume. Authority raises certainty. When you understand this distinction, you stop trying to overpower conversations and start learning how to anchor them. Authority begins with posture, not stiff, not exaggerated, but steady. When your body is grounded, your mind becomes grounded. Your presence communicates stability. People instinctively trust stability. They gravitate toward the person who looks self-regulated, not the one fidgeting, shifting, shrinking, or over-animating. A grounded communicator stands, sits, and breathes as if they belong in the moment. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't react to every micro-expression. Their posture says, "I'm here, I'm centered, and I'm not threatened." Tone is the next layer of authority. A calm, measured tone tells people you're in control of yourself, and therefore likely in control of the situation. A shaky voice signals doubt. A rushed voice signals insecurity. A loud, uncontrolled voice signals emotional volatility. But a steady tone? It signals strength. It builds trust. It creates a container for the conversation. People lean into voices that feel safe. They pull away from voices that feel unstable. Your tone can say more about you than your actual message ever will. Then come boundaries, one of the strongest signals of natural authority. The timid communicator collapses into people's demands. They soften their opinions. They accept interruptions. They agree too quickly. They adjust themselves constantly to preserve harmony. But the grounded communicator sets invisible lines. They finish their sentences. They hold their space. They decline what doesn't align. They say no without apology. They don't let urgency push them, and they don't let pressure reshape them. Boundaries communicate self-respect, and self-respect communicates authority. And then there is verbal minimalism, the hallmark of someone who commands attention without trying. Powerful communicators speak less, but mean more. They don't ramble. They don't overwhelm their points with unnecessary detail. They don't chase validation with excessive explaining. Their words carry weight because they remove everything that doesn't need to be said. A minimalist communicator creates impact through clarity, not quantity. Think of the difference between the timid communicator and the grounded one. The timid communicator over-explains. They fill every silence with justification. They say just, maybe, I think, I guess, if that makes sense. They constantly check for approval. They speak as though they're waiting for permission to exist, and the world responds accordingly. It gives them the bare minimum of attention and the bare minimum of respect. But the grounded communicator does the opposite. They speak slowly. They speak simply. They choose their moment. They look directly at the person they're addressing, not to intimidate, but to connect. Their message is not wrapped in apology or hesitation. It is delivered cleanly. It is delivered calmly. It is delivered with intention. And because of that, people hear their words differently. People attach significance to what they say. People assume competence, intelligence, and leadership, even before the message is fully processed. Authority is clarity. Authority is direction. Authority is the energy of someone who knows where they stand and speaks from that position without wavering. When you communicate with natural authority, people feel guided, not pressured. They feel steady, not overwhelmed. They feel safe, not controlled. This is why real authority is magnetic. People want to follow it. To understand this at the deepest level, imagine two people giving instructions. One speaks quickly, piling sentences on top of each other, bouncing between thoughts, hoping the listener keeps up. You can feel their internal uncertainty leaking out. The other speaks slowly, gives one instruction at a time, pauses, and makes sure the message lands. Which one would you trust? Which one would you follow? Which one would you remember? Authority doesn't come from saying more. It comes from meaning more. And meaning more begins with removing everything that dilutes your presence. There is a powerful psychological shift that happens when you adopt the authority mindset. You stop trying to earn your place and you start expressing from your place. You stop performing and you start embodying. You stop chasing approval and you start offering direction. People feel this shift instantly. They may not be able to explain it, but they sense it on a primal level. Authority also influences how people treat your time. When you speak with authority, conversations become more organized. People interrupt you less. They take your words seriously. They assume you know what you're doing. They assume you have a plan. Your presence sets the standard for how the interaction unfolds. You become the emotional thermostat in the room, the one who defines the temperature instead of reacting to it. All of this sets the stage for something even more crucial. Authority is measured in the first moments of every interaction. Humans judge quickly. They form impressions rapidly. Before you say anything meaningful, people have already decided whether you're someone to watch or someone to ignore. This is why authority is so connected to first impressions. It's why posture, tone, boundaries, and minimalism matter the moment you enter a room. This is your turning point. You're no longer entering conversations with timid energy, hoping to be taken seriously. You're entering with grounded clarity, creating the conditions where being taken seriously becomes the natural default. And now that you understand how authority is formed, it's time to look at the battlefield where authority is won or lost in seconds. The world of first impressions. Chapter 5. First impressions. Win the room in 7 seconds. The human brain is fast, faster than you realize. Before you speak a single word, before your thoughts fully form, before your intentions even surface, the minds around you are already making decisions about you. Decisions about trust. Decisions about competence. Decisions about whether your presence matters. It takes roughly 7 seconds. 7 seconds for the brain to scan your posture, your tone, your energy, your expression, and determine whether you are someone to notice or someone to dismiss. Most people walk into rooms unaware of this power. You won't anymore. Think about the times you entered a room and felt small. You hesitated. You watched others first. You wondered where to stand, how to act, whether you belonged. That uncertainty seeped into your posture, your eyes, your breath. And people responded to it instantly, not because they meant to undervalue you, but because the brain reacts to signals. Uncertainty signals fragility. Fragility lowers credibility. The timid version of you sets the room's perception long before your skills or intelligence can save you. Now imagine entering the same room differently. Not louder, not boastful, but intentional. Your posture aligned, your breath steady, your eyes present instead of searching. You're not performing, you're arriving. People sense it. They feel the grounded energy before they hear your voice. They register your presence as a point of stability. This is the psychological advantage of a powerful first impression. It frames how everything you say afterward is interpreted. First impressions rely on micro-expressions, tiny shifts in the face that communicate volumes. A relaxed jaw signals confidence. A slight upward tilt of the chin conveys assuredness. Genuine eye contact, steady, not aggressive, creates an immediate sense of trust. When you're tense, your face tightens, your eyes dart, your lips compress. When you're grounded, your expression softens into calm awareness. People feel the difference instantly. Micro pauses are just as influential. When you take a beat before speaking, you signal self-control. You show you're not rushing to justify yourself or fill silence. Silence is a currency of confidence. Those who own it project psychological strength. A brief pause before speaking tells the room, I choose my words. I'm not driven by urgency. That single signal elevates your perceived intelligence and authority in seconds. Gesture economy is another critical element. Timid communicators fidget, overgesture, or shrink themselves. Their hands betray their nerves. Powerful communicators do the opposite. Their movements are minimal, deliberate, purposeful. They gesture to emphasize, not to seek approval. Their stillness creates impact. When you move less, your presence means more. The brain reads stillness as power because power is controlled, not chaotic. These elements together create the architecture of first impressions. When you step into a room with intention, your energy says, I am here by choice. And people respond. They recalibrate around you. Their minds open. Their attention focuses. You become someone worth listening to, not because you demanded it, but because you projected it. Likability in those first moments is not about charm or jokes or forced enthusiasm. It's about emotional safety. People like those who feel steady. People trust those who seem honest in their emotional presentation. You don't need to be overly warm. You need to be real. Authenticity communicates confidence. Confidence communicates credibility. Credibility creates likability. These elements stack effortlessly when your first impression is aligned with who you truly are. Credibility forms even faster than likability. It's built through the smallest cues, the way you stand, the tone you greet someone with, the calm in your breath. Credibility is the brain saying, this person might be worth following. When your first impression radiates stability, the brain assigns you a higher ranking in its social hierarchy, not out of ego, but out of instinct. Humans follow what feels strong and safe. The timid communicator enters a room hoping not to be noticed. The grounded communicator enters a room knowing attention follows intention. This doesn't mean demanding attention. It means embodying the kind of presence that naturally attracts it. Your goal is not to dominate the room. Your goal is to align with it so clearly that people naturally orient themselves toward you. A powerful first impression frames every interaction that follows. If you enter with strength, your words are interpreted as stronger. If you enter with doubt, even brilliant ideas sound fragile. This is the psychological mechanism behind snap judgments. The brain uses early signals as filters for everything afterward. It's easier to maintain authority than to rebuild it. It's easier to inspire trust at the beginning than to earn it later. The first 7 seconds decide the next 7 minutes, and often the next 7 opportunities. Imagine a meeting where you enter with uncertainty. Shoulders slightly hunched, voice small, eyes unsure. People subconsciously categorize you as someone to listen to last. Now imagine entering the same meeting with grounded presence, chin level, breath slow, energy calm. People categorize you as someone to listen to first. The content hasn't changed. Your presence has. The stakes of first impressions extend beyond rooms. They shape interviews, dates, negotiations, arguments, presentations, and every chance encounter that could alter the path of your life. This is not pressure. This is power. Once you understand the psychology behind these moments, You stop walking blindly into rooms hoping for a fair chance. You start creating the conditions for influence. And influence begins at the door. This awareness naturally transitions into persuasion, the next evolution of your communication. First impressions are the frame. Persuasion is what fills the frame. Without a strong frame, even the best message struggles. With a strong frame, persuasion becomes effortless. People listen differently when they already respect you. They hear your ideas through the filter of authority you've established. This is why mastering first impressions isn't vanity, it's strategy. It's preparation for the conversations that matter most. Your presence is your opening argument. Your energy is your introduction. Your first 7 seconds are the vote people cast before they know your name. And now that you understand how those seconds work, you're ready to take the next step, learning how to influence ethically, powerfully, and intentionally once you have their attention. Chapter 6. Ethical Persuasion. Influence without manipulation. Persuasion is one of the most misunderstood forces in human communication. Many fear it, many misuse it, many reduce it to tricks, tactics, and shortcuts designed to bend people to their will. But real persuasion, ethical persuasion, is none of those things. Real persuasion is disciplined, intentional, rooted in integrity. It is the art of guiding minds without stealing autonomy, the art of influencing outcomes without violating trust. When you learn to persuade ethically, you gain a power that doesn't just change conversations, it changes lives. To understand persuasion clearly, you must first face the emotional contrast at its core. There are 2 ways people influence: fear-driven influence and value-driven influence. Fear-driven influence manipulates emotions, pressures decisions, and exploits uncertainty. It uses fear because fear creates quick compliance. But compliance is not respect. Compliance is not trust. And compliance never lasts. Value-driven influence is different. It uplifts. It clarifies. It empowers the person on the other side. It gives them a better way to think, a better path to choose, a better framework for understanding. Value-driven influence doesn't force. It guides. It doesn't threaten. It educates. It doesn't diminish. It elevates. And because it's rooted in honesty and clarity, its impact is long-lasting. People don't just follow your idea, they trust it, own it, and carry it forward. If you want to persuade ethically, you must master the triad of persuasion: credibility, emotion, and logic. These 3 forces shape every decision people make. They operate in the background of every conversation, every debate, every pitch, every moment where minds shift from one view to another. Credibility is the foundation. People listen to who you are before they listen to what you say. They scan your tone, your posture, your track record, your presence. If your credibility is shaky, your ideas cannot stand. If your credibility is strong, your ideas gain instant stability. You've seen this in your own reactions. When someone grounded speaks, their words feel heavier. Credibility turns sound into signal. Without it, persuasion collapses before it even begins. Emotion is the second pillar, the heartbeat of persuasion. Human beings don't make decisions through pure logic. They make decisions through emotional meaning. They choose what feels right, what feels safe, what feels aligned with who they want to become. When you speak to someone's emotions, you connect with the part of them that drives action. But emotion must be used responsibly. not to manipulate, not to create fear or urgency that traps someone, but to illuminate truth. Emotional persuasion is about helping people feel the weight of a decision, not forcing them into one. Logic is the final pillar. Logic gives structure. It gives clarity. It organizes ideas into something understandable and believable. Logic answers the question, does this make sense? Without logic, persuasion floats, emotionally powerful but unanchored. With logic, persuasion becomes undeniable. Emotion moves people. Logic stabilizes the movement. Together, they turn ideas into commitments. When these three forces work as one, credibility, emotion, and logic, you form a persuasive presence that is impossible to ignore and effortless to trust. But to master them ethically, you must understand how they play out in real situations. Imagine you're leading a team and need them to take a difficult direction. A manipulative communicator might use fear. If we don't do this, everything collapses. They create panic to create compliance. It works fast, but it damages morale, trust, and long-term loyalty. Now imagine the ethical persuader. They start with credibility. They speak calmly, clearly, standing grounded in their experience. The room trusts their presence before they trust the message. Then they bring in emotion, not fear, but purpose. This direction is challenging, but it positions us for real growth. It moves us closer to what we're capable of. They speak to vision, not fear. Finally, they bring logic. Here's the data. Here's the reasoning. Here's why this path makes sense. The message now lands not as pressure, but as guidance. Ethical persuasion doesn't push people. It opens doors and shows them why walking through is worth it. Another example. Imagine trying to help a friend who feels stuck. Manipulation might sound like guilt. If you don't change, you're ruining your life. Ethical persuasion sounds like empowerment. I can see how much you're carrying, and I know you have the strength to move in a better direction. Let me show you what I see. Same goal, different method. One weakens, one uplifts. This is the heart of ethical persuasion. You leave people stronger than you found them. You help them think better, not just choose differently. And yet, persuasion becomes most powerful not in comfortable moments, but in difficult ones. When stakes are high, when emotions are tense, when people feel defensive, afraid, overwhelmed, or resistant. In these moments, most communicators collapse. They react emotionally. They force their point. They escalate tension. They attempt to dominate the conversation because they feel their influence slipping. But ethical persuasion shines brightest under pressure. When a conversation becomes difficult, your credibility matters more. Your emotional calm matters more. Your logic matters more. People in distress don't need pressure. They need clarity. They need someone who can hold the moment without cracking. They need someone who can organize the chaos. They need someone whose presence reduces tension instead of adding to it. In high-stakes situations, ethical persuasion becomes a form of leadership. You become the anchor when others drift. You become the steady presence when others shake. You become the voice that guides the conversation back into reason, respect, and resolution. People remember those who stay grounded when emotions rise. That is where real influence is forged. You are not learning persuasion to win arguments. You are learning it to build bridges. You are learning it to guide minds, not control them. You are learning it to create alignment, not submission. And the more you practice persuasion through credibility, emotion, and logic, the more powerful your communication becomes, because people trust the intention behind it. This sets the stage for the next phase of your growth, navigating conversations that test your composure, conversations that challenge your identity, your patience, your confidence, conversations where emotions flare and clarity evaporates, because persuasion is not only about inspiring, it is about stabilizing. And the next step in that journey is learning how to turn conflict into control and difficulty into depth. Chapter 7. Difficult Conversations, Turning Conflict into Control. There is a unique weight that sits in your chest before a difficult conversation. The tension builds, your stomach tightens, your breath shortens. You rehearse scenarios in your mind, things you want to say, things you're afraid to say, things you hope the other person doesn't say. This is the dread of confrontation, the silent fear that the moment will spiral into chaos. Most people avoid difficult conversations because they assume conflict is uncontrollable. But conflict is never about the chaos around you. It's about the psychology within you. When you learn to master that psychology, every difficult conversation becomes an opportunity to rise in influence instead of collapsing under pressure. The difference between chaotic conflict and calm strategic communication is internal stability. Chaotic conflict happens when emotion takes the wheel. Voices rise, words sharpen, reactions stack on top of reactions. Clarity dissolves. Neither person feels heard. Neither person feels safe. The entire conversation becomes a battlefield where the goal shifts from resolution to survival. You've seen this. You've lived it. And afterward, you walk away exhausted. Not because of the topic, but because of the emotional cost. Calm, strategic communication is the opposite. It's rooted in presence. It's governed by awareness. It creates space instead of pressure. It makes room for clarity instead of confusion. When you stay grounded while others escalate, you hold the power in the conversation, not by force, but by stability. The person who stays calm becomes the person who leads. The first step is emotional detachment, not from the situation, but from the impulse to react. Emotional detachment means you acknowledge your emotions without letting them hijack your behavior. It means you feel the heat rising, but you don't let it touch your words. You breathe. You slow your thoughts. You watch your emotions instead of becoming them. Detachment gives you choice, and choice is the foundation of control. The second step is agenda clarity. Before the conversation even begins, you must know what you want, not what you feel, not what you fear, what you want. Do you want resolution, understanding, boundaries, truth, apology, direction? Without a clear agenda, your communication wanders. You get pulled into emotional traps. You chase side arguments. You lose yourself in the moment. But with a clear agenda, you don't get distracted by emotional bait. You stay on course. The conversation may twist, but your purpose stays straight. The third step is response timing. Most people respond too quickly. They try to defend themselves instantly, answer instantly, correct instantly, but urgency is the enemy of clarity. When tension rises, your nervous system accelerates your reactions, and accelerated reactions create miscommunication. Strategic communicators slow everything down. They give themselves a moment. They create a pause. They respond, not react. That pause shifts the power dynamic immediately. The moment you choose when to respond, you reclaim psychological control. Imagine someone raising their voice at you. The timid communicator rushes to defend themselves. The reactive communicator matches the intensity. The grounded communicator remains still. They breathe. They let the intensity wash past them like wind hitting a wall. Then they respond with calm precision. That response disrupts the escalation. It interrupts the emotional momentum. The entire energy of the conversation recalibrates because you refused to feed the fire. Difficult conversations demand presence. They demand awareness of tone, pace, posture. They demand the courage to stay calm when your instincts want to fight, flee, or freeze. When you remain anchored, you create psychological stability, not just for yourself, but for the entire interaction. People naturally gravitate toward the calmest force in the room. When emotions flare, the grounded person becomes the leader. To navigate tension, you must also learn how to ask clarifying questions. Questions redirect emotion into logic. They slow down the pace of conflict. They force both sides to think, not just feel. Questions like, "What exactly do you want to resolve? Can you help me understand what triggered that reaction? What outcome are you hoping for?" These questions turn arguments into conversations. They transform tension into clarity. But one of the strongest tools in difficult conversations is something most people never use: controlled silence. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. When you pause, you give the other person space to hear themselves. You let their emotions settle. You show them that you're not rushing to retaliate. Silence is the psychological equivalent of holding ground. It shifts the rhythm of the conversation. It forces the other person to adjust to your pace, instead of forcing you to adjust to theirs. Most people fear silence because they think it makes them look unprepared. In reality, silence makes you look powerful. People trust those who are not desperate to fill the air. Silence communicates emotional control. It communicates presence. It communicates that your words are chosen, not spilled. Difficult conversations also require you to hold your boundaries without hostility. When you communicate with calm firmness, "I'm willing to discuss this, but not in this tone," or "I hear you, but here's my limit," you teach others how to treat you. Boundaries are not walls. They are agreements. And when you communicate them with clarity and calm, people respect them more. Navigating conflict is not about winning. It's about leading the moment toward clarity. It's about elevating the emotional intelligence of the conversation. It's about staying grounded in who you are, not getting lost in someone else's reaction. You don't rise by overpowering people. You rise by stabilizing the environment they're drowning in. The more you practice emotional detachment, agenda clarity, and response timing, the more powerful your presence becomes. You'll notice people reacting differently. Arguments that once triggered you will feel easier to hold. Confrontations that once felt draining will feel manageable. You'll feel your voice becoming more centered, more strategic, more influential. And this growth naturally leads to the next level of communication, the subtle, often underestimated power of silence itself. Because sometimes the most influential words are the ones you choose not to say. Sometimes the strongest authority in a room comes not from speech, but from restraint. Sometimes control is found not in volume, but in the pause. You are ready now to understand that silence is not empty. It's full of power, and it's time to learn how to use it. Chapter 8: Strategic Silence, Power in the Pause. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools in communication. People fear it. They rush to fill it. They treat it like a gap that needs fixing instead of a force that needs mastering. But silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful weapons of influence you will ever possess. It has weight. It has presence. It creates pressure without aggression, authority without volume. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is communication. Most people ramble when they're nervous. They speak too quickly, add unnecessary details, repeat themselves, soften their point, or desperately try to keep the air filled to avoid discomfort. Nervous rambling weakens presence. It signals insecurity. It tells the listener that you don't trust your own words enough to let them stand on their own. And when you don't trust your words, the room won't trust them either. But deliberate stillness, strategic silence, does the opposite. When you pause thoughtfully, you communicate self-control. You communicate that your point has weight. You signal that you're not afraid of the moment. Silence draws attention. It pulls the listener toward you. It makes each word that follows more intentional, more powerful, more respected. Consider negotiation. A novice negotiator speaks too much. They explain, justify, clarify, oversell. They reveal their hand without realizing it. But the skilled negotiator knows the true power lies in the pause. They make an offer, then say nothing. They let the silence fill the space. They allow the other person to react, retreat, reveal fear, or offer a concession. Silence becomes a psychological mirror that forces the other side to confront their own thoughts instead of hiding behind yours. Or imagine leadership moments. A leader who fills every second with noise creates exhaustion, not direction. A leader who delivers a message and then pauses creates gravity. The team feels the importance of the moment. They lean in. They absorb. Silence adds emphasis in a way words cannot. The strongest leaders don't speak to impress. They speak to impact. And impact requires space. Silence also dismantles manipulation. When someone tries to pressure you, provoke you, or rush you into a decision, they rely on emotional momentum. Manipulation thrives on speed, on forcing you to respond before you can think clearly. But when you pause, their momentum collapses. Their emotional force hits a wall. They realize you won't be moved by pressure. You won't be dragged into reaction. Strategic silence protects your boundaries and reveals their intentions. Picture a personal boundary moment. Someone challenges you, criticizes you, or tries to bait you into defending yourself. The reactive communicator snaps back. The timid communicator apologizes. But the grounded communicator remains silent for a moment, long enough for the tension to shift, long enough for the intensity to lose oxygen, long enough for the other person to hear the weight of their own words. Silence in these moments is not retreat. It is dominance without hostility. Silence also magnifies meaning. When you pause after a powerful point, the listener absorbs it more deeply. The mind leans into the moment to fill the space, replaying what you just said. This is how you imprint your ideas, not by speaking endlessly, but by letting the important parts breathe. Most people underestimate how much clarity silence creates. It gives you time to think. It gives the other person time to process. It slows down chaos. It reveals what matters. It gives conversations a rhythm that feels intentional instead of frantic. When you master silence, you master pacing. And pacing is one of the most underrated dimensions of influence. Silence says, I choose the rhythm here. Silence says, I'm not afraid of this moment. Silence says, my words matter enough to stand alone. These unspoken messages elevate your presence instantly. Strategic silence also strengthens your inner world. When you stop rushing to fill gaps, you learn to sit with discomfort. You learn to control the urge to prove yourself. You learn patience, one of the rarest forms of self-discipline. Silence trains your nervous system to remain calm in tension. It rewires your relationship with conflict. It turns pressure into opportunity. But silence does more than create power. It creates clarity. When you pause and truly listen, you discover what's happening beneath the surface. You hear what people mean, not just what they say. You notice their tone, their hesitations, their emotional cues. Silence makes space for truth to rise. And truth is the foundation of influence. This leads to the next evolution of communication: listening. Because every powerful communicator understands that the weight of your words depends on the depth of your listening. Speaking is only half of influence. The other half is your ability to hear the unspoken, to understand what's underneath, to read people beyond their language. Strategic silence prepares you for that. It strengthens your presence, sharpens your awareness, and positions you to listen like a leader, not reactively, but intentionally. You now know how power moves in the pause. The next step is learning how power moves in the spaces between other people's words. Chapter 9. Listening like a leader. Hearing what others can't say. Most people believe listening is passive, that it's simply waiting for someone else to finish talking. But true listening, the kind that elevates your influence and transforms your relationships, is one of the most strategic skills you can develop. Leaders don't listen to reply. They listen to understand. They listen to uncover meaning. They listen to hear the things that are never spoken out loud. When you learn to listen like a leader, you stop reacting to words and start responding to truth. The difference between surface-level listening and deep psychological listening is night and day. Surface-level listening is distracted. It's impatient. It's filtered through assumptions, ego, or the desire to get your point across. It's the type of listening that nods politely while the mind plans its next sentence. The other person can feel this immediately. They feel unseen, unheard, unvalued, and once they feel that, their trust collapses. Deep listening is something completely different. Deep listening slows the moment. It widens your awareness. It takes you out of your thoughts and into theirs. When you listen deeply, you're picking up on everything. Tone shifts, pauses, emotional tension, changes in energy. You're not just hearing the message, you're reading the person. And that ability gives you an unmatched advantage in every conversation. Start with tone. Tone carries more truth than words. Someone may say, "I'm fine," but their tone might reveal exhaustion, frustration, disappointment, or fear. Tone exposes emotional states people try to hide. Leaders listen to how something is said, not just what is said. They understand that tone is the doorway to the speaker's internal world. Next is body language. Most communication is nonverbal, yet most people ignore it. Is the person leaning in or leaning back? Are their hands open or closed? Do their eyes stay steady or dart away? Is their posture relaxed or defensive? Body language reveals comfort, trust, resistance, and insecurity. When you attune yourself to these cues, you begin hearing the true conversation happening beneath the surface-level one. Then there are the word choices. People tell you what they fear, value, or doubt through the words they reach for. Repeated phrases like, I don't know, or it's whatever signal avoidance or uncertainty. Words like always, never, or should reveal emotional patterns and hidden pressure. Leaders listen for these linguistic fingerprints. They don't correct them. They explore them. And then there's the emotional undercurrent, the feeling behind the facts. Often, the real message is not in the sentence. It's in the emotional vacuum between sentences. Someone may argue about the surface-level issue, but be hurt about something deeper. Someone may complain about a task, but actually be overwhelmed by something internal. Someone may use anger to hide fear. Someone may use silence to hide pain. Leaders listen for these shifts with empathy, not judgment. They care about understanding the person, not just responding to the topic. Great communicators understand more than they speak. They don't dominate conversations. They decode them. They gather information, insights, and emotional context before choosing their response. And because their responses are built on deeper understanding, they always feel wiser, calmer, more grounded. People trust those who truly listen. People follow those who make them feel understood. Listening like a leader also means listening without assumption. Most people enter conversations with mental scripts, ready to fit the other person into a category: wrong, emotional, irrational, stubborn. When you listen with assumptions, you distort the message. You project your fears or biases onto the conversation. True listening requires you to release those assumptions long enough to understand the person in front of you, not the version of them you've created in your mind. This type of listening also requires patience. Leaders don't rush people. They don't jump in to solve, defend, or interrupt. They create space for clarity, space for honesty, space for emotional release. The more space you give someone, the more they reveal, and the more they reveal, the more influence you gain, because trust grows in the presence of understanding. Imagine sitting with someone who is upset. If you rush to fix the issue, you miss the message. If you interrupt, you break the flow. If you defend yourself, you escalate tension. But if you listen deeply, really listen, you create a shift. Their breathing slows, their voice softens, their walls lower. They feel safe, and safety is the doorway to truth. Listening like a leader turns every conversation into a map. You learn where the other person is coming from, where they're heading, and where they're emotionally stuck. From there, you can guide the interaction with far more precision and empathy. And this naturally leads into the next level of mastery: framing. Because once you understand the deeper truth behind someone's words, their fears, their hopes, their intentions, you gain the power to reshape the conversation with intention. You can take the raw emotional material and reframe it into clarity, direction, and meaning. Listening is the intake. Framing is the output. Listening is understanding. Framing is guiding. Now that you know how to hear what others can't say, it's time to learn how to shape conversations with purpose, so you lead them instead of following them. Chapter 10. The Power of Framing, Controlling the Narrative. Framing is the backbone of powerful communication. It is the silent architecture behind every influential message, the unseen structure that shapes how people interpret what you say. Most people speak reactively. They wait for the situation to unfold, then respond to whatever meaning someone else has already imposed. But leaders don't operate that way. Leaders define meaning before others do. They choose the frame, and by choosing the frame, they control the narrative. Reactive communication is chaotic, it's emotional, it's driven by pressure, not intention. When you're reactive, you speak from confusion. You let others set the tone, shape the story, and determine the direction. And suddenly, you're explaining yourself, defending yourself, or trying to untangle a misunderstanding that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Reactive speech puts you at a disadvantage because narrative control has already been handed over to someone else. Proactive communication is different. It's deliberate. It's grounded in psychological awareness. Proactive communicators set the context before the message. They establish direction before emotion takes over. They don't just respond to the moment, they shape the moment. When you frame a conversation, you tell the listener how to interpret your words before they interpret them on their own. Consider a simple example: feedback. The reactive communicator dives straight in. I need to talk to you about your performance. Immediately, defenses rise. The conversation begins with tension and remains there, but the proactive communicator frames first. I want to talk about how we can make your strengths even more effective. Same topic, completely different emotional impact. The frame changes everything: the expectations, the mindset, the openness. Leaders use framing to reframe problems. Instead of saying, "We have a major issue," they say, "We have an opportunity to fix something before it grows." Instead of saying, "This is going to be difficult," they say, "This is going to challenge us in the best way." They don't lie. They don't sugarcoat. They shift perspective. They give people a direction that turns panic into purpose, fear into focus, worry into strategy. Leaders also reframe emotions. When someone expresses frustration, a reactive communicator might absorb it, defend themselves, or escalate the tension. A proactive communicator reframes the emotional charge. "It sounds like this really matters to you," or "I can hear how much this impacted you. Let's figure it out together." They transform raw emotion into collaborative energy. They take heat and convert it into clarity. Framing also guides expectations. When you set expectations before the conversation begins, you eliminate confusion and prevent misinterpretation. I want to understand your point deeply before I share mine. This conversation might be emotional, but it's important for us. Let's focus on solutions instead of blame. Expectations like these create a shared container. They prepare the listener's mind. They align both parties before conflict has a chance to grow. The true power of framing lies in its ability to define meaning. Human beings don't respond to events. They respond to the meaning they assign to those events. And if you don't define the meaning, the mind will fill the gap with fear, assumptions, or past experiences. Framing prevents that spiral. It provides clarity before confusion, direction before distraction, interpretation before insecurity. Imagine entering a high-stakes meeting. If you begin with reactive energy, uncertainty, rushed explanations, or vague intentions. You invite others to project meaning onto your message. But if you frame the room with confidence, here's what we're focusing on today, here's why it matters, and here's where we're heading, you command the psychological space. People relax. People listen. People orient themselves toward your direction because you've created it intentionally. Framing isn't manipulation. It's leadership. Manipulation hides truth. Framing reveals it. Manipulation forces meaning. Framing clarifies it. Manipulation removes choice. Framing organizes choice. When you frame with integrity, you help people understand your message in the clearest, most constructive way possible. To master framing, you must slow down and choose your opening lines with care. The first sentence of any conversation is the most powerful. It is the foundation upon which everything else stands. Opening with strength, clarity, and intention places you in command of the interaction from the start. Opening with uncertainty hands the reins to someone else. Framing also turns misunderstandings into insights. When someone misreads your intention, you can shift the frame. Let me rephrase that. What I really want to emphasize is, or, let's look at this from another angle. You're not correcting them. You're guiding them. You're showing them the path instead of forcing them onto it. Leaders who master framing speak less, but influence more. They don't respond to every emotional wave. They don't get dragged into conflict they didn't define. They don't let others shape the story for them. They stay centered, intentional, and mentally elevated. And because they lead with framing, their communication feels clearer, more confident, and more persuasive. This skill naturally leads to another essential tool of influence: storytelling. Storytelling is the emotional engine of framing, the method by which you make your meaning relatable, memorable, and motivated. If framing is the structure, storytelling is the soul. Storytelling creates the emotional impact that moves people beyond understanding and into action. You've learned now how to control the narrative by setting the frame. Next, you'll learn how to bring that narrative to life, how to use stories to carry truth into the human heart, how to transform logic into emotion, and how to create influence that lasts long after the conversation ends. Chapter 11: Storytelling that Moves Minds. Stories are the oldest technology of influence. Long before data existed, long before logic dominated discourse, long before persuasion became a science, human beings learned through stories. Stories bypass resistance. They slip past the defensive walls of the conscious mind and speak directly to the subconscious, the part of the brain where beliefs form, emotions take root, and decisions are made. When you tell a story, you're not communicating information. You're shaping interpretation. You're guiding how someone feels about the information, and feeling drives far more decisions than facts ever will. Think about it. People forget statistics, but they remember the moment a character overcame something impossible. They forget instructions, but they remember how a story made them feel. They forget details, but they remember the transformation. Stories embed meaning in a way nothing else can. That's why dull information falls flat, because data without emotion has no friction, no gravity, no movement. But a story becomes an experience. It becomes a mirror. It becomes a message the listener internalizes as if it was their own. Great storytellers don't overwhelm with detail. They create emotional arcs. They build tension, provoke curiosity, and lead the audience through an internal journey. Every powerful story follows a simple but potent structure. Tension, arrow struggle, arrow insight, arrow shift. This is the psychological formula that moves the human mind. Tension is the hook. It's the disruption, the friction, the moment something stops being normal. Without tension, there's no reason to pay attention. Tension says, something is about to change. It triggers curiosity. What happens next? This is why great stories never start with perfection. They start with a crack, a conflict, a question. The listener leans in because they sense motion. Struggle is the emotional core. It's where the listener sees themselves in the story. Struggle reveals vulnerability, challenge, pressure. It shows what the character must face internally and externally. This is where empathy forms. This is where the audience feels the weight of the journey. Without struggle, there is no investment. There is no meaning. It's the part of the story that whispers to the audience, this could be you. Insight is the turning point. It's the moment of clarity, the lesson discovered, the truth revealed, the shift in perception. Insight is where transformation begins. It's not the solution itself. It's the understanding that leads to the solution. Insight is the spark that transitions the character from confusion to awareness. And in that spark, the listener's mind opens. Shift is the final movement. It's the change in behavior, perspective, or identity that results from the insight. This is where the story lands its impact. This is where transformation becomes real. The shift is what stays with people long after the story ends. It becomes the internal message they carry forward. A story without a shift is just entertainment. A story with a shift becomes influence. To understand the power of this structure, imagine two ways of giving advice. The first, you should stop letting fear control your decisions. Logical, correct, but likely ignored. The second, let me tell you about a time fear almost made me walk away from the best opportunity of my life. Then you share the tension, your hesitation, the struggle, the internal battle, the insight, the moment you realized fear wasn't the problem, avoidance was. And the shift, the success that followed because you acted anyway. Same message, completely different impact. The story bypasses the ego and plants the lesson directly into the listener's worldview. Stories also create cinematic pacing. They rise, they fall, they breathe, they use silence, pauses, and rhythm to build emotion. A well-timed pause after a moment of tension amplifies impact. A sudden drop in tone during struggle deepens empathy. A slow, grounding voice during insight creates clarity. A confident lift during the shift creates momentum. Storytelling is emotional choreography. Leaders use storytelling to create connection. Negotiators use it to create perspective. Teachers use it to create understanding. Visionaries use it to create belief. You don't need dramatic stories to be persuasive. You need honest stories, stories that reveal truth, stories that show your humanity, stories that help people see themselves more clearly. The simplest story, told with authenticity and emotional flow, can outperform the most complex argument. Storytelling is also a bridge between logic and emotion. You can present the strongest facts in the world, but if the listener doesn't feel something, the message won't move them. A story wraps meaning around logic. It gives data a heartbeat. It gives ideas a face. It turns abstract concepts into lived experience. That is why stories endure. That is why stories persuade. That is why stories change minds. And in the modern world, storytelling has become the new battlefield. Digital communication, videos, social media, emails, voice messages, runs on narrative. Every post is a frame. Every message is a story. Every piece of content is a chance to influence how people feel, see, and think. But most people communicate digitally with the same monotony they use in everyday speech. They send information, not stories. They send noise, not meaning. If you want to stand out in a world overloaded with content, you must master digital storytelling. You must learn to package your message in a narrative that captures attention in seconds and holds it through emotion. You must learn to translate tension, struggle, insight, and shift into formats people scroll through, share, and remember. Whether you're writing an email, pitching an idea, posting online, or sending a voice note, storytelling transforms the interaction. It turns your communication into something people feel. And when people feel something, they act, they listen, they follow. You've now learned how to move minds through narrative. And the next step is understanding how to bring that presence into the digital world, where influence spreads faster than ever. Chapter 12: Mastering Digital Communication. The digital world is loud, fast, crowded, and unforgiving. Messages fly by. Notifications compete for attention. People scroll with half awareness and zero patience. In this environment, most communication collapses before it even begins. Chaotic online messaging, long-winded texts, poorly structured emails, rambling videos, emotion-heavy reactions get swallowed instantly. The people who stand out, the ones who command attention in the digital space, are the ones who communicate with clarity, precision, and presence. Digital authority isn't about being everywhere. It's about being intentional wherever you choose to appear. When you enter a digital space, you lose many of the tools you rely on in person: tone, full body language, energy, presence. What remains are fragments, short sentences, quick tones of voice, limited gestures, small visual frames. In these fragments, people try to judge your intelligence, your confidence, your emotional state, and your reliability. Because of that, digital communication requires a new level of intentionality. Everything is amplified. Everything is compressed. Everything is interpreted faster than you expect. Short-form communication is the first battleground. A text message, a DM, a comment, a caption, these are tiny containers that must carry weight. When your words are short, they must be sharp. When your space is limited, your meaning must be clear. Vague messages create confusion. Overly emotional messages create misinterpretation. Walls of text create overwhelm. The key to digital brevity is precision. One idea, clean phrasing, no clutter. A powerful digital communicator writes in a way that cuts through the noise with confidence. Each sentence feels deliberate. Each word feels chosen. Brevity becomes a signal of strength. Then comes the world of email, the modern stage for professional credibility. Emails reveal your structure, your thinking, your emotional control, your clarity. Most people write emails reactively, too long, too rushed, too emotional, too unclear. Digital authority shows up in the opposite: a clear subject, a calm tone, a logical structure, and a concise purpose. Strong email presence makes people trust you before they even meet you. Your clarity becomes your reputation. But the most influential digital arena today is video communication, video calls, virtual meetings, content creation, storytelling on camera has become the new face of leadership, and video demands presence. Your facial expressions, your posture, your gestures, your micro pauses, all of these become cues that shape the viewer's impression. The camera amplifies everything. Insecurity becomes louder, hesitation becomes visible, imbalance becomes distracting. But confidence also amplifies, stillness amplifies, calm amplifies, intention amplifies. To master video presence, you must adopt gesture economy. Just like in-person communication, less is more. Wild movements create chaos. Nervous fidgeting creates distraction. Excessive expressions feel unnatural. A strong digital presence uses small, deliberate movements, a steady gaze, a relaxed face, a grounded posture. You don't need to dominate the screen. You need to stabilize it. Emotional calibration is another essential skill. The digital environment intensifies emotional signals. A slightly frustrated message reads as anger. A slightly unclear text reads as passive-aggressive. A neutral tone reads as cold. That means you must calibrate your digital emotions more intentionally than your in-person emotions. You must add clarity where tone is missing. You must match the energy of the medium. You must remember that people cannot hear your intentions. They only see your words. Presence in digital communication also comes from pacing. Speak too fast and you look anxious. Speak too slow and you lose energy. Text too quickly and you seem impulsive. Text too slowly and you seem disengaged. Post too often and you seem insecure. Post too rarely and you seem invisible. Digital pacing is about rhythm. Active enough to remain relevant, intentional enough to avoid noise. Dominating digital environments doesn't mean being louder. It means being clearer. It means showing up with purpose. It means respecting people's time by delivering messages that land quickly and meaningfully. The people who communicate with digital authority build credibility faster, are trusted sooner, and have their ideas remembered longer. But digital mastery also demands authenticity. If you try to perform, exaggerate, or imitate someone else's style, it becomes obvious. The camera exposes pretension. Text exposes artificiality. Audiences today crave realness, real tone, real perspective, real energy. Authenticity doesn't mean raw vulnerability every moment. It means consistency between who you are offline and who you are online. When your digital presence aligns with your true identity, your communication gains natural gravity. Digital communication is not a lesser form of human connection. It is an extension of it. The same principles you've learned throughout this journey apply here: presence, clarity, authority, intention, emotional intelligence. Online or offline, communication is psychological, and those who understand the psychology of digital interaction rise faster than those who rely on instinct alone. This chapter is your invitation to unify everything you've learned. Digital spaces are no longer optional. They are where opportunities live, where influence grows, where reputations are shaped. When you bring grounded tone, concise clarity, emotional awareness, and authentic presence into your online communication, you become impossible to ignore. You become the person whose messages feel stable in a chaotic world. You become the voice people trust in a digital storm. And now, as all these skills begin weaving together, confidence, authority, framing, storytelling, silence, listening, presence, It's time to integrate them into something deeper. Not just techniques, not just strategies, but an identity. Because the final stage of communication mastery is not about what you do, it's about who you become. Chapter 13, Identity. Becoming the person people listen to. There comes a point in your communication journey where tactics are no longer enough. Techniques can sharpen your voice, strategies can elevate your presence, skills can refine the way you express yourself. But none of that creates lasting influence unless it becomes part of who you are. This chapter is where you stop practicing communication as something you do and begin embracing it as something you are. This is where you shift from performance to embodiment, from method to identity, from communicating with effort to communicating with essence. Identity is the real engine of influence. People don't listen to you because you use the right words. They listen because of who they believe you are. Your communication is a reflection of your internal world. If your identity is rooted in insecurity, your voice will always waver, no matter how many techniques you memorize. If your identity is reactive, your presence will collapse under pressure. If your identity is uncertain, your message will feel ungrounded even when the content is solid. But when your identity becomes intentional, when you build yourself into someone who communicates from clarity, confidence, and internal alignment, your presence transforms naturally. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop defending yourself. You stop chasing validation. You start radiating a calm, steady power that people trust instinctively. This isn't about ego. It's about coherence. It's about becoming the version of yourself that your voice has always deserved. To understand identity-level communication, you must first contrast the old communicator with the new one. The old communicator reacts. They speak from emotion instead of intention. They let fear shape their tone, let doubt shape their pacing, let insecurity shape their presence. Their words are influenced by whoever is in front of them. They adapt to expectations instead of directing the conversation. They crumble when energy grows tense. They retreat when confidence is required. This version of you was shaped by habit, not choice. But the new communicator is someone entirely different. The new communicator leads. They speak from a grounded center. They choose their tone instead of being controlled by it. They control the rhythm of the conversation instead of being swept into someone else's emotional current. Their presence is steady, unshaken, precise. The new communicator knows that confidence is not noise, it is alignment. They know that authority is not dominance, it is clarity. They know that influence is not performance, it is identity. Identity is built through consistent habits, repeated with intention. Every time you practice speaking slowly, you reinforce the identity of someone who is in control. Every time you breathe before responding, you reinforce the identity of someone who chooses their reactions. Every time you maintain boundaries in conversations, you reinforce the identity of someone who respects themselves. Identity is not forged in one moment. It is forged in thousands of small moments where you choose who you want to become. As these habits stack, something powerful begins to happen. You stop thinking about communication techniques because they become your natural expression. The breath you once had to control becomes your default rhythm. The pauses you once had to practice become second nature. The clarity you once struggled to find becomes instinctive. The authority you once had to project becomes effortless. You don't fake confidence, you emanate it. You don't imitate leaders, you embody leadership. This transition is where emotional escalation happens. You begin to feel the difference between the old you and the new you. The old communicator felt small, rushed, overwhelmed, easily shaken. The new communicator feels grounded, intentional, and steady. The old communicator feared tension. The new communicator uses tension as a tool. The old communicator hid in hesitation. The new communicator stands in clarity. You're not just learning to speak differently. You're learning to be different. Identity-level communication also requires emotional neutrality. This doesn't mean you suppress emotions. It means your emotions no longer dictate your voice. You learn to observe your internal state without being consumed by it. You learn to recognize your fears without letting them narrate your words. You learn to stay centered even when others are chaotic. Emotional neutrality creates presence. Presence creates authority. And authority creates influence. As your identity evolves, people respond to you differently. They give you more space. They take your words seriously. They sense your energy before you speak and adjust their behavior accordingly. People listen to those who listen to themselves. People trust those who trust themselves. Your identity becomes a signal, calm, clear, confident, and that signal shapes every interaction. You will notice that communication becomes less about what you say and more about how you exist in the moment. When your identity aligns with your message, your presence carries authority even in silence. When you speak, your words feel anchored. When you pause, the room waits. When you express a boundary, it holds. When you offer guidance, people lean in. This is the power of becoming someone people listen to, not because you demand attention, but because your identity commands respect. But there is a deeper transformation still. Once communication becomes identity, it becomes purpose. You stop speaking to be impressive. You speak to be impactful. You speak to elevate others. You speak to guide, not to dominate. You begin using your voice as a tool for clarity, connection, and contribution. You stop communicating from ego and begin communicating from intention. This is the threshold of mastery, where communication stops being a set of techniques and becomes a reflection of your inner discipline, emotional intelligence, and personal truth. And once you cross this threshold, you will see the final evolution of influence, the ability to speak with a voice that not only moves minds, but elevates the people who hear it. Everything you've learned so far, confidence, authority, silence, listening, framing, storytelling, has been preparing you for this moment. You are no longer building skills, you are building yourself. You are becoming the person whose voice shapes rooms, calms storms, and inspires clarity in others. Now you're ready for the last step, the voice of influence. Not the loud voice, not the demanding voice. The steady voice that changes people because it comes from someone fully anchored, fully aligned, and fully intentional. The next chapter is where everything comes together. Final chapter, the voice of influence, speak with power, live with purpose. You've walked through the fire of transformation. You've journeyed from uncertainty to clarity, from hesitation to grounded authority, from scattered speech to intentional influence. This final chapter is not an ending, it is an arrival. an arrival into the version of yourself you've been building with every pause, every breath, every moment of self-awareness. You have learned not only how to communicate, but how to be someone whose voice carries weight, whose presence shapes moments, whose words move minds. Now it is time to step fully into that identity. Look back for a moment at where you began. Your voice was once reactive, shaped by emotion instead of intention. You hesitated. You doubted yourself. You questioned whether your voice mattered. Conversations drained you. Conflict shook you. First impressions intimidated you. Silence terrified you. And influence felt like something reserved for people with more charisma, more certainty, more natural presence. But now, you see clearly. Communication isn't about natural talent. It's about psychological mastery. It's about the disciplined choice to express with purpose instead of drifting through conversations. You've learned that influence is not something you chase. Influence is something you become. You've learned to speak with clarity instead of noise, authority instead of apology, calmness instead of chaos. You've learned that true confidence comes not from perfection, but from alignment. Your thoughts, your voice, your identity moving as one. You've learned that silence is not emptiness, but strategy. You've learned that listening is not passive, but powerful. You've learned that framing shapes meaning, storytelling moves emotion, and presence commands attention. These are not tactics anymore. They are the foundations of who you are becoming. The voice you carry now is different. It is the voice of someone who knows themselves, someone who understands the psychology behind influence and uses it ethically, someone who chooses their words instead of spilling them, someone who creates clarity in rooms full of noise, someone who speaks to elevate, not dominate, someone who leads with intention, steadiness, and truth. This is the voice of influence, not loud, not forceful, but undeniable. Real influence is grounded. It is patient, it is steady, it is ethical. It is built on consistency, not bursts of intensity. Influence lives in the rhythm of how you speak, how you listen, how you frame, how you pause, how you breathe. It lives in the way you hold yourself, the way you carry your presence, the way you move through the world without needing validation to confirm your worth. When you speak with influence, you don't just share ideas. You shape perspectives. You inspire clarity. You transform the emotional landscape of the moment. You leave people better than you found them. That is leadership. And leadership begins with the way you communicate. Communication is no longer a skill for you. It is a lifestyle, a discipline, a daily practice of intention and awareness. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to embody your highest self. Every conversation becomes a chance to create understanding, not confusion. Every word becomes a tool to build connection, not distance. Every silence becomes a moment of strength, not fear. And as you live with this level of intention, your communication becomes your legacy. The way you speak becomes the way people remember you. The way you make others feel becomes the mark you leave on the world. Influence is not measured in how many people hear your voice. It's measured in how many lives your voice impacts, how many minds you elevate, how many hearts you steady, how many paths you clarify. Now you stand at the threshold of this new identity. The old communicator, the one shaped by fear, doubt, confusion, no longer defines you. That version was necessary for your growth, but it is not the version you carry forward. The new communicator, the intentional communicator, the grounded communicator, is the one who will speak into your future. This final chapter asks you to step fully into your power, not through aggression, but through alignment. Not through noise, but through clarity. Not through manipulation, but through integrity. Your voice carries power when it is anchored in purpose. Your influence expands when it is rooted in authenticity. Your presence becomes undeniable when you choose to show up as the clearest, calmest, most intentional version of yourself. So speak now with the awareness that your words matter. Speak with the understanding that your presence shapes the emotional environment around you. Speak with the confidence that you are capable of guiding moments, elevating conversations, and inspiring change. Speak like someone who knows the weight of their voice. Speak like someone who understands that communication is creation. You are no longer communicating to survive. You're communicating to lead. You're communicating to build. You're communicating to influence with purpose and integrity. Every conversation is an opportunity to project strength, clarity, and calm power. Every interaction is a chance to rise into your identity. Every moment is an invitation to live with intention. And as you step into this next chapter of your life, carry this truth with you. You speak smart because you think smart, and you think smart because you choose to. Your voice is no longer an echo of who you used to be. It is the anthem of who you are becoming. Your new beginning. You've reached the end of this journey, but this isn't a finish line. It's a doorway into the next version of yourself. You have walked from confusion to clarity, from uncertainty to presence, from struggling to be heard to commanding attention with authenticity. This transformation wasn't just about learning techniques. It was about reclaiming your identity. It was about stepping into a communication style rooted in confidence, intention, and deep self-respect. You are no longer the person who speaks hoping to be understood. You are the person who speaks knowing your words carry weight. You are no longer the person who hides behind hesitation. You are the person who stands grounded, even when the moment is heavy. You are no longer the person who fears silence, conflict, or influence. You are the person who leads with integrity, emotional intelligence, and calm authority. This is your new beginning. Your voice is now an extension of your growth. Every conversation you enter is a chance to strengthen your presence. Every pause is a reminder of your control. Every story you tell becomes a reflection of your depth. Every moment of listening becomes an act of leadership. Communication is no longer something you do, it's something you live. But mastery does not come from a single breakthrough. It comes from daily refinement, from practicing awareness, from choosing intention over impulse, from reminding yourself who you are becoming every time you open your mouth. True influence is built through consistency, and you now have the tools, the mindset, and the identity to shape that consistency with purpose. Your journey is not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up with clarity. It's about speaking from truth instead of fear. You will have moments where old habits try to pull you back, but you will also have the awareness to rise above them. Each day, your voice will grow steadier. Each day, your presence will grow stronger. Each day, you will step further into the leader within you. So move forward now with confidence. Walk into conversations with the calm authority you've earned. Carry yourself with the self-respect you've built. Let your communication reflect the mastery you're stepping into. And remember this final truth: communication is creation. Every word you speak shapes the world around you. Every choice you make writes the narrative of your life. And now, you control that narrative.